Disclaimer: this program contains graphic descriptions of real crimes. Viewer discretion is advised. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. 3 days. That's all it took for her world to fall apart. She had just updated her will, thinking she was protecting her family, securing her home, and planning for the future. But before the ink on those papers had even dried, her husband vanished without a word. No goodbye, no warning, just silence, and a coffee cup cooling on the counter. If you've ever loved someone enough to plan for the day you might not be there, imagine waking up to find they were the one who disappeared first. Tonight we open a file where love, money, and fear intersected in ways no one saw coming. Helena Armitage, 36, an elementary school counselor, precise, soft-spoken, known for labeling everything from her kitchen jars to her students' journals. She wasn't reckless. She didn't make decisions without a reason. Daniel Armitage, 38, her husband of 10 years, contractor, loud laugh, calloused hands, quick charm, the guy neighbors waved at when he mowed their lawns or fixed a broken mailbox. But lately he had been distracted, checking his phone a little too often and keeping it face down on the table, setting Briar Mill a small riverside town where people live by the saying, "Nothing stays secret for long." The spark on a quiet Thursday afternoon, Helena signed new paperwork at her lawyer's office. A simple update to her will, she said, just a few protective measures. 3 days later, Daniel was gone. Thursday, 10 p.m. The will. Helena meets with Linden and Pike attorneys. She moves the family home into a trust under her name, adds her sister as executor, and quietly includes a clause: if she dies, Daniel can't sell the house alone. He'd need secondary approval. Friday, the smile. A neighbor's doorbell camera catches Daniel joking with Mrs. Cardenas as he carries tile samples from his truck. But when he checks his phone, his smile thins. Saturday, the argument. A neighbor hears muffled voices. A glass breaks. "Helena, you promised me." "Daniel, it's handled." Then silence, followed by pacing footsteps. Sunday, 6:40 p.m. The errand. Daniel tells Helena he's off to pick up grout for a job. He leaves in his silver Tacoma. He doesn't return. Monday, 7:15 a.m. The call. Helena tries Daniel's phone, straight to voicemail. She calls the supply yard. He never picked up materials. By 9:03 a.m. she dials 911. "My husband is missing. Inside the house, everything is tidy." Too tidy. Daniel's workbench in the garage has been scrubbed down, gleaming unnaturally for a carpenter's space. Phone records. His last ping near Riverside Market at 7:02 p.m. Sunday. Then silence. Money trail. 2 ATM withdrawals that week, $6, 100 each. Just enough to suggest cash problems. Witnesses. A jogger's dashcam records Daniel's truck near the old quarry road at 7:22 p.m. Parked on the shoulder. Another vehicle. A dark SUV with tinted windows, idling nearby. The whispers begin. Did Helena know something? Did she change her will because she suspected her husband wouldn't be around much longer? She tells detectives she wasn't plotting. She was protecting. She had discovered Daniel implied the house as collateral on a business loan without telling her. Her will was a safeguard, not a weapon. But in the court of small town opinion, perception becomes suspicion. 1. Helena, her timing is damning. Will on Thursday, disappearance on Sunday. But her phone shows her home all night, texting her sister about lesson plans and groceries. 2. Cole Benton, Daniel's business partner. The company, Second Chance Renovations, was struggling. Cole admits Daniel mentioned a quick side job Saturday night to settle a favor, but he won't say with whom. 3. The lender, the name Brandon Pike, surfaces. known in contractor circles for cash loans with brutal repayment terms. Men who owed him didn't just lose money, they sometimes disappeared. 4. Mark Webb, an old friend of Daniel's, quiet, handy, loyal, a man Daniel once helped years back. Mark shows up at Helena's will signing as a witness. Later, cameras spot him at a motel linked to Pike, and then Mark vanishes too. Riverside Market camera, Daniel buying coffee at 6:58 p.m. Behind him, the same dark SUV later seen near the quarry. Dashcam clip, Daniel leaning on the guardrail, checking his phone, the SUV parked close. Garage workbench, cleaned with solvent, fibers from a heavy ratchet strap wedged under the lip. Dog's reaction, their dog, Archer, growls at a towel found in the garage, fear imprinted on cloth. To police, Helena insists, "I did the will because I wasn't leaving him, because I planned to stay. He was the one who stepped out the door." She admits Daniel had been restless, lifting weights late at night in the garage, staring at cracks in the tile instead of answering questions. She seems cold to some, but others recognize grief turned inward, sealed like a letter no one gets to read. Detectives track a burner phone that pinged near the quarry Sunday at 10:16 p.m. Linked to a motel room rented in cash. Inside the trash, a coffee lid
please,
with
don't
Daniel's
do this.
print. A
I didn't
torn
see
flyer
anything, I
for
swear.
second chance renovations. A broken zip tie. On camera, Mark Webb leaning on the balcony, smoking. Pressed harder, Cole admits the truth. Daniel had borrowed from Pike. He owed money he couldn't repay. Pike demanded a meeting. Daniel asked Mark to back him up. Cole begged him not to go. Daniel just said, "You can't hide from the tide. It'll reach your feet anyway." Picture it, Daniel's Tacoma idles. The dark SUV pulls in behind. Pike's associate steps out, all smiles and white teeth. "Mr. Armitage, let's talk about your timetable." Mark hovers nearby, cigarette glowing in the dark. Promises are made, threats follow, and then silence. What happens next lives only in the dirt, the straps, the solvent, and the dog's memory. Weeks later, Lyndon and Pike receive a letter in Daniel's handwriting. "Regarding the will, please tell Helena her instincts were correct. She saved what matters. I'm sorry I didn't do the same while I had the chance." No signature. No return address, just enough to deepen the mystery. Cole dissolves the company. Sometimes he drives to the quarry and just sits. Mrs. Cardenas hires a new contractor, but leaves a note on her fridge. "If Daniel comes back, tell him the backsplash looks nice." Helena keeps working with children. One student asks her what she'd tell her future self. She thinks, "Don't let fear make you soft on the truth." Helena's change wasn't about cutting Daniel out. It was about slowing him down. By moving the house into a trust, she blocked anyone from quickly using it as collateral. If Pike wanted leverage, it was gone. 3 days later, Daniel disappeared. Coincidence or consequence? On the anniversary, Helena drives to the river at dawn. Fog curls off the water. She rereads the letter in Daniel's hand. "Your instincts were correct." She folds it, slips it back into her coat. She doesn't know if Daniel died in that quarry or walked away under a different name. All she knows is that sometimes love isn't about romance, it's about paperwork, signatures, and safeguards. And sometimes the cruelest betrayals aren't about leaving, but about leaving without a word. The letter should have brought closure, but instead it cracked the case wide open. Daniel's handwriting was undeniable. Detectives compared it against his contractor estimates, his signatures on receipts, even a birthday card he once wrote to Helena. The strokes matched, the loops on his Y, the slant of his T. It was his hand. And yet, the message inside only deepened the mystery. Your instincts were correct. You saved what matters. I'm sorry I didn't do the same while I had the chance. What did that mean? Was he admitting he'd walked away? Was he warning her that Pike, or someone else, still had their claws in him? Or was it a confession, written under duress, meant to make her stop searching? Detectives now turned their attention to the quiet man in the shadows, Mark Webb. The cameras showed him at the motel balcony. The witness logs placed his name alongside Helena's will signing. The dashcam caught his silhouette on the quarry road, but Mark was no longer in town. His small apartment was empty, blinds drawn, fridge still stocked with milk that had long since spoiled. His truck sat abandoned near a trail, head 20 miles out. To some investigators, Mark wasn't just an accomplice. He was now the prime suspect. But others saw it differently. Maybe Mark wasn't running from guilt. Maybe he was running from fear. The same kind of fear that made Daniel scrub his workbench clean and withdraw cash in small increments. By this point, Briar Mill was buzzing with theories. At church potlucks, whispers traveled faster than the hymns. Some swore Helena knew more than she was saying, that the will was her alibi, her way of looking innocent while setting the stage for Daniel's disappearance. Others pointed at Pike's name. They said the Armitages were collateral in a game much bigger than their small townhouse, and Daniel had simply been erased, like so many before him. But in every grocery line, in every coffee shop, one truth lingered. It was impossible to ignore the timing. Helena's will on Thursday, Daniel's disappearance on Sunday. 3 days, that was all. Then came the break everyone had been waiting for. 2 hikers stumbled upon a rusted shape at the base of a ravine, not far from the quarry. It was Daniel's silver Tacoma half, buried in brush, glass shattered, hood crumpled, inside an empty coffee cup, the same kind Daniel bought that night, muddy footprints across the back seat, 2 sets. One larger,
he tried to meet my eyes,
and
like he wanted me to notice.
A torn
Then they
strap
pulled him into the
stained
SUV
with something
and drove
dark
off.
that tested positive for blood, but the blood wasn't Daniel's. Forensic testing revealed the blood belonged to someone else. Someone whose DNA had already been logged in a state database. The name Mark Webb, the loyal friend, the quiet witness, the man who vanished alongside Daniel. And suddenly the question wasn't just what happened to Daniel. It was this: did Mark die trying to protect him, or did Mark's betrayal seal Daniel's fate? The discovery of blood in Daniel's truck should have been the final clue, the one piece that tied everything together. But instead it only splintered the case further. The lab results came back with a name: Mark Webb, the loyal friend, the quiet witness, the man who had vanished in the same breath as Daniel. The strap found beneath the truck's floor mat was stained with Mark's blood. But here's what caught investigators' attention. The droplets weren't a large pool or heavy smear. They were spatter, small, sharp flecks, as if Mark had been struck, cut, or grazed inside that cab. Blood patterns told a story. A short burst of arterial spray near the back seat. A smear along the rear door handle, suggesting Mark tried to grab hold or escape, and chillingly a partial palm print overlapping the blood, not Mark's, not Daniel's, but still unidentified. Whoever else was there, they weren't leaving fingerprints for free. Detectives split into camps. Theory 1, Mark the accomplice. He wasn't just a bystander. He was helping Daniel, maybe even helping Pike's men, and somewhere along the way, the plan turned on him. Theory 2, Mark the victim. Mark wasn't an accomplice at all. He was loyal, too loyal. He followed Daniel into danger and paid the price when Pike's crew decided they didn't need a witness. Theory 3, Mark the key. Mark was neither pawn nor victim, but the missing link. Maybe he carried secrets of his own. Maybe he double-crossed Daniel, or maybe he knew enough to make Pike nervous. Here's where things get strange. When detectives dug deeper into Mark's background, they found something hidden in old court record. Years earlier, Mark had been arrested during a minor construction scam using fake invoices to pocket small sums. The charges never stuck, but buried in the paperwork was a name listed as a business contact, Brandon Pike. The same Pike who now loomed over Daniel's debt. This changed everything. Mark hadn't just wandered into Daniel's orbit. He already had a history with Pike. He had stood in that shadow before. So what was he doing the night Daniel vanished? Protecting his friend or settling his own old scores? The blood was damning but not conclusive. Without a body, without a weapon, the case stayed half-formed. Forensic techs pulled DNA from the coffee cup lid in the truck. Daniel's saliva as expected. But on the rim was something else. Trace amounts of another person's skin cells, too degraded to confirm. Could Mark have shared that cup, or was someone else sitting in Daniel's truck before it went over the ravine? Every answer seemed to multiply into more questions. So now, Briar Mill asks itself, was Mark Webb Daniel's savior, trying to shield him from a predator who already owned them both? Was he the betrayer, helping lure his friend into the trap for Pike's payout? Or was he the missing key, the one man who could explain Daniel's disappearance, if only he hadn't bled out in the back of that truck? The truth was hanging in the balance, and the deeper detectives dug, the more it became clear this wasn't just a case of a missing husband. This was a case where everyone carried secrets. The discovery of Mark Webb's blood had shifted the investigation, but it didn't deliver answers. It only opened more doors, and as those doors swung wide, new voices entered the room. The district attorney's office had a problem. They had a missing husband, a bloody truck, a letter with no return address, and yet no body, no weapon, no timeline they could lock down. One prosecutor put it bluntly in an interview, "We have smoke, but without fire, no jury will convict." Still, their eyes kept drifting back to one person, Helena Armitage. Why? Because in cases like this, the spouse is always the first suspect, and the most convenient one. The updated will 3 days before Daniel vanished looked too coincidental. It wasn't proof, but it was narrative, and prosecutors know that juries are built on stories. The forensic lab didn't see a story. They saw data. They charted the blood spatter, reconstructed the strap fibers, mapped the partial palm print. Their conclusion: at least 3 people were in that truck the night it crashed: Daniel, Mark, and one unidentified individual. But the experts also noted something else: the cleaning solvent from the garage matched trace chemicals found on the truck's rear mat, which suggested someone from the house, someone with access to Daniel's workspace, may have prepared the truck before it went into the ravine. That single detail reopened suspicion toward Helena. Did she help cover something up? Or was she framed by the same people who wanted Daniel silenced? Then came Emily Armitage, Daniel's younger sister. Emily had never trusted Helena. She told reporters, "My brother was a good man. He wouldn't just vanish. If he's gone, someone wanted him gone. And I think Helena knows more than she's saying." Her words spread like wildfire. Headlines latched onto them. Wife updates will, husband vanishes, coincidence or cover-up, Armitage case, is Helena victim or mastermind? Emily's grief became gasoline for public suspicion. Every time she spoke, the narrative tilted harder against Helena. While the legal system stalled, the media surged ahead. True crime bloggers dissected Helena's every expression. Was her flat-toned calm resilience, or cold detachment? Why didn't she cry on camera? Why did she fold the letter so neatly after reading it? Every little action became evidence for whichever theory you wanted to believe. To some, Helena was the grieving wife who lost a husband to debts she never asked for. To others, she was the calculating mastermind who cut Daniel off with paperwork, then made sure he disappeared before he could drag her down. So the case fractured into camps. Prosecutor's camp, Helena knew. Maybe she orchestrated. At minimum, she withheld the truth. Forensic camp. There's a third play run. Identified, dangerous, and possibly still at large. Family camp. Emily wanted justice, even if it meant tearing Helena's name apart in the process. Community camp, split in two. Half believed Helena was a victim of a husband's dangerous secrets. The other half believed she was far too calm for someone left behind. Was Helena truly just a woman tightening the reins of her life, blindsided by her husband's hidden debts? Or was she the one person who saw the storm coming and used the will not as a shield, but as a sword? The answers were slipping further away, and then another discovery threatened to change the narrative all over again. Just when suspicion against Helena was at its boiling point, a discovery near the quarry shifted the tide. Two county workers clearing brush along an access trail stumbled on something metallic, half buried in the mud. At first glance, it looked like trash, a dented toolbox, rusted around the edges, but inside was a collection of items that made detectives' jaws tighten. A pistol, unregistered, its serial number filed off. Ballistics later matched it to casings found years earlier in another unsolved assault tied to Pike's men, a bundle of zip ties and straps, the exact kind whose fibers were found under Daniel's garage workbench. A prepaid phone, dead battery, with a call log that showed two numbers, Daniel's and another linked to a burner phone that pinged the quarry tower the night he vanished. A folded slip of paper, water, stained but legible. On it, 3 names were written: Daniel Armitage, Mark Webb, Helena, underlined twice. This single box flipped the narrative. The prosecutors could no longer ignore Pike's shadow. The items weren't Helena's. They weren't household scraps. They were tools of control, stashed like a kit meant for intimidation. If Helena were the mastermind, why would Pike's calling cards show up a mile from the quarry? Why would a burner phone tied to the night of the disappearance sit in the mud, hidden in a box only Pike's men would carry? The evidence didn't exonerate Helena, but it finally broadened the lens. Forensic experts zeroed in on the slip of paper. The handwriting wasn't Daniel's, it wasn't Mark's. It matched a sample from an old traffic ticket signed by one of Pike's known associate, Trevor Dane, a former enforcer turned loan collector. If Dane wrote those names, then Helena's presence on the list wasn't guilt. It was a target. Emily Armitage, Daniel's sister, had to face a cruel pivot. For months she'd pointed her finger at Helena, convinced her sister law was hiding something. But now she was forced to reckon with a harsher truth. If Helena's name was on Pike's list, she wasn't plotting, she was next. In a rare press statement, Emily's voice cracked as she admitted, "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Helena was scared all along. Maybe she still is." The headlines followed suit. New evidence points toward Loan Shark Network in Armitage case. Quarry box discovery suggests wife was a target, not a mastermind. Helena Armitage, victim or survivor. Public opinion swung again. The grieving wife became the hunted widow in the public eye, but the discovery brought more questions than answers. Why were Daniel and Mark's names crossed out on that slip of paper, but Helena's name left underlined, uncrossed? Did it mean Daniel and Mark had already been handled? Did it mean Helena's turn was coming? And if Pike's network really silenced Daniel, why send a letter in Daniel's own handwriting weeks later? Was it a goodbye or a forced confession written at gunpoint? The quarry box didn't close the Armitage mystery. It widened it. It turned the spotlight from one woman's suspicious timing to an entire network of predators who had the power to make people vanish, the reach to plant evidence, and the ruthlessness to keep families guessing forever. For Helena, the nightmare wasn't over. If anything, it was only beginning, because once your name is written on Pike's list, It's only a matter of time before someone comes looking. The box near the quarry had changed everything. It tied Daniel's disappearance not just to a domestic dispute or a wife's suspicious timing, but to something bigger, older, and darker. It tied him to Pike, and as detectives pulled at those threads, the investigation began to unravel a pattern that stretched beyond Briar Mill. One of the first cracks came from an unlikely place, a retired truck driver named Glenn Maddox. Maddox walked into the precinct carrying nothing more than a memory and a faded receipt. 10 years earlier, he claimed he saw a young man dragged out of a pickup at a rest stop on Highway 61. The men doing the dragging, one of them was Pike's associate, Trevor Dane, the same man whose handwriting had been found on the quarry box. Maddox admitted he never came forward at the time. "I figured you don't cross men like that, but when I read Daniel's story I thought maybe it's the same pattern repeating." Investigators dug deeper. Case 1, the Miller debt. A handyman named Carl Miller vanished after defaulting on a construction loan. His truck was found stripped in a junkyard. His wife received a cryptic letter that read, "He couldn't pay." Don't try to. Case 2, the Jensen job. 2 partners in a roofing business disappeared 6 months apart. Both had borrowed from Pike's circle. One body later turned up near a river, hands bound with the same type of zip ties found in Daniel's truck. Case 3, the Briar Hollow assault. A young laborer was beaten within an inch of his life. He survived, but refused to name his attackers. The ballistics from casings at the scene matched the pistol found in the quarry box. Daniel's disappearance wasn't unique. It was part of a repeating cycle. Pike's network thrived on desperation. Contractors, handymen, small crews, they all shared one thing: uneven cash flow. When jobs stalled, they borrowed. When they couldn't repay, Pike's men stepped in. And once you owed Pike, you weren't just in debt, you were owned. Daniel's mistake wasn't just taking the loan. It was trying to outthink men who thrived on control. As detectives laid the cases side by side, the pattern grew undeniable. The same tools, the same methods, the same vanishing acts, and now, the same eerie calling card. Cryptic letters written in the victim's own hand, dripping with regret, but offering no closure, which raised the most haunting question of all. If Pike's men forced Daniel to write that note, how many other families had been handed the same false comfort? For Helena, the revelation was devastating. She wasn't just the grieving widow under suspicion. She was part of a chain of victims stretching back years. Her name on Pike's list wasn't coincidence. It was confirmation. Daniel might not have been the first, and unless someone broke the cycle, he wouldn't be the last. Detectives had circled Pike's name long enough. The quarry box, the old cases, the blood in Daniel's truck, all of it pointed to the same shadowy figure. But now, with a pattern emerging and Helena's name written on that list, the time for circling was over. It was time to go straight into Pike's world. At dawn, tactical units rolled up to a warehouse on the edge of Briar Mill, one of Pike's supposed storage facilities. Inside, they expected lumber, tools, maybe stolen materials. Instead, they found rows of ledgers, names and amounts scribbled in coded shorthand, stacks of prepaid phones, hundreds of them, all burned out after single uses, a locked steel cabinet containing 6 driver's licenses, none belonging to Daniel, but all tied to missing men who had crossed Pike's circle in years past. No Daniel, no Mark, but the message was clear. This was a graveyard of debts, a paper trail of men swallowed by the network. Then came the break that changed everything. A former associate, Eddie Ramos, was picked up on a weapons charge. Facing time, he agreed to talk. Eddie described Pike's operation in chilling detail. Men who defaulted were given choices: work for Pike or vanish. Some disappeared because they refused, others because they knew too much. And in Daniel's case, Eddie claimed Pike was furious not about the money but about Helena's will. "See," Eddie whispered, Daniel's house was leverage, Pike wanted it, but when Helena locked it down, that leverage vanished. That's when Pike said Daniel had become useless. With Eddie's testimony, detectives pushed harder. They tailed Pike's men, watched cash exchanges at gas stations, intercepted coded calls, but Pike was slippery. Every move was countered. Every lead was a trap. Cars would circle blocks, phones would switch hands. Detectives felt like mice running through a maze Pike himself had built, and yet one thread slipped through the cracks. Eddie mentioned a holding site near the state line, a cabin where Pike's men sometimes kept debtors before deciding their fate. Units moved in fast. They reached the cabin at midnight. Inside, rope and straps, cigarette butts, a mattress stained with dried blood, and on the floor, shoved against the wall, Daniel's wedding ring. The ring was proof Daniel had been there, proof he hadn't vanished willingly, proof that Pike's men had held him. But was it also proof he was dead? Or was it a message left behind, maybe even dropped on purpose, that Daniel was still alive somewhere, waiting for someone to connect the dots? The discovery left detectives torn. Was Daniel silenced forever? Or was there still a chance he was out there, held like the others, trapped in the web of Pike's deaths? The discovery of Daniel's wedding ring inside Pike's cabin shook the case to its core. For Helena, it was devastating proof that Daniel hadn't simply walked away. He had been taken, trapped in Pike's world of debts and punishment. But for Daniel's sister, Emily, the ring only sharpened her anger. Emily went public again, this time in front of cameras. If they found his ring, she said, gripping it tightly as though she could pull Daniel back by sheer will, then they know where he was. Someone knows what happened to him. And I won't stop until I have his body or the truth. Her words cut deep. She accused law enforcement of dragging their feet, of focusing too much on paperwork and not enough on kicking down doors. And beneath her fury, she let another accusation slip. If Helena really loved my brother, she'd be standing here with me, demanding justice. Instead, she hides. It was a cruel jab, but one that landed with the public. Helena wasn't hiding. She was surviving. Days after the raid, she found an envelope on her porch. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. It showed her walking Archer near the river. The picture had been taken just days earlier. On the back, 3 words were scrawled, "You're on the list." It was Pike's silent imitation without noise, a warning that he hadn't forgotten her, that Daniel's debts were still hers to pay. Helena called the police, her voice steady but her hands shaking. For the first time, she admitted, "I'm scared I won't make it out of this alive." Just when hope seemed thin, detectives received an anonymous tip. A caller, male, mid-30s, voice shaking, claimed he had seen Daniel, not months ago, not weeks ago, but 2 days earlier. The caller said he spotted a man matching Daniel's description in a truck stopped 3 towns over, accompanied by 2 men. The man looked tired, thinner, but unmistakably him. He tried to meet my eyes, the caller said, like he wanted me to notice. Then they pulled him into the SUV and drove off. The call cut off before detectives could trace it. The tip reignited everything. Was Daniel alive, dragged from one holding site to another, used as leverage until Pike decided his fate? Or was the sighting staged? Another trick, another layer of fear meant to keep Helena in line. Detectives scrambled to pull surveillance from the truck stop. Emily pressed harder in the media, demanding a search, and Helena, now caught between suspicion and sympathy, lived under the weight of threats and the possibility that her husband might still be breathing somewhere. For months, the Armitage case had been about paperwork, blood, and silence. But now, with Daniel's ring in one hand and a sighting in the other, a new possibility loomed. This wasn't just a disappearance. This wasn't just a debt gone wrong. This was a man caught in a war of shadows, and the question became chillingly simple. Was Daniel already gone? Or was time running out to bring him back alive? The anonymous tip about the truck stop had electrified the investigation. If Daniel had really been seen alive, thin, tired, flanked by Pike's men. Then everything changed. Now detectives had to move fast. Investigators pulled hours of footage, and there, at 3:12 p.m., a man matching Daniel's description walked into the convenience store. He looked gaunt, beard scruffy, clothes loose. He grabbed a bottle of water, glanced nervously over his shoulder. Behind him, two men. One tall, broad-shouldered with a neck tattoo. The other smaller, wiry, scanning the aisles like a hawk. Daniel never paid. The taller man slapped cash on the counter, hustled him out. Seconds later, a dark SUV rolled off the lot. It wasn't proof, but it was close enough to hope. Detectives traced the SUV to a shell company registered under a fake landscaping business, one of Pike's known fronts. Warrants uncovered rental agreements, all cash, based for properties near state lines, safe houses, holding sites, and more chillingly, an entire web of names, contractors and small business owners, many now missing. Daniel wasn't the only one caught. He was just the latest. Then the threats returned. Another envelope appeared in Helena's mailbox. Inside was a photo. Daniel at the truck stop, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. On the back, "If you want him back, stop talking to police." Helena, it was the cruelest twist yet. Silence could mean saving Daniel, but silence also meant letting Pike's men continue their cycle unchecked. She sat at her kitchen table, Archer pressed against her legs, staring at the photo until her vision blurred. Was Daniel still alive because of her? Well, because she'd denied Pike his leverage, or was he still alive despite it? A bargaining chip waiting for her to fold. Detectives prepared a sting operation at one of Pike's safe houses, but they warned Helena if she pulled back now, if she stopped cooperating, Daniel might slip through their hands forever. And Helena faced a question no spouse should ever have to answer. Do you gamble with the system to save him, or gamble with silence and risk losing him for good? The next move wouldn't just decide Daniel's fate, it would decide hers. The safe house sat at the edge of a forgotten logging road, its windows boarded, its driveway hidden under a canopy of pine. Detectives moved in just before midnight. Unmarked cars ringed the property, radios whispering static. SWAT crouched in the tree line, and somewhere in the dark, Helena waited in a cruiser, clutching the photo of Daniel. From the truck stop, this was it, the closest she'd been to him in months. At 12:07 a.m., the front door splintered. Officers flooded inside. What they found was chaos. Two men scrambling for weapons. A duffel bag stuffed with cash and burner phones. Maps with highway routes circled in red. But no. Daniel, in the back room, a mattress lay on the floor, sheets damp, smelling of sweat. On the wall, fresh markings carved into the wood. 3 tallies, then another 2, 5 marks in total. A prisoner's calendar. Was Daniel counting days? Or had Pike's men left the marks to taunt whoever came? Looking as officers cuffed the men inside, shots cracked from the tree line. An SUV barreled down the dirt road, headlights off, tires spitting gravel. Inside, Pike's reinforcements. The sting turned into a firefight. Radios screamed. Officers returned fire. The SUV swerved, clipped a ditch, roared into the woods. In the chaos, one of the arrested men shouted something chilling. "You'll never find him alive if she keeps running her mouth." Everyone froze. He hadn't said "you'll never find him." He'd said alive. Back at the precinct, detectives laid it out for Helena. If she continued cooperating, if she stayed visible, Pike might kill Daniel just to silence her. If she went quiet, stopped pushing, stopped helping, they might keep Daniel alive as leverage. It was a cruel equation, her voice versus his life. Helena's hands shook as she stared at Daniel's wedding ring, now sealed in an evidence bag. Did she keep speaking out, gambling that exposure would bring him home, or did she go silent, risking that silence would bury him forever? 2 nights later, Helena got her answer. Her car alarm wailed at 3 a.m. When police arrived, they found her windshield shattered. On the hood, scrawled in spray paint, were 3 words, "Time is running." Pike's network wasn't retreating. They were striking back, reminding Helena that every move she made pulled her deeper into their game, and somewhere in that game, if he was still breathing, Daniel was the prize they were willing to burn the world to protect. Helena had always let the detectives lead. She gave them statements, handed over the will, stayed quiet when Pike's threat painted targets on her door, but the photo of Daniel at the truck stop changed her. For the first time in months, she saw him alive, weary but alive, and with that, fear gave way to resolve. If the system was too slow to bring him home, then she would have to dig herself. Helena began where Daniel's trouble had started, his debts. She poured through his old invoices, payment slips, even crumpled receipts stuffed in shoeboxes. She noticed patterns the detectives had missed, tiny gaps in dates, phantom suppliers. Daniel had paid in cash, and mysterious phone numbers scrawled in margins of his work ledgers, one number repeated often, always next to the word advance. It wasn't a bank, it wasn't a client, it was Pike's middleman. Tracing that number led Helena to a construction supply yard 2 towns over. On the surface, it looked legitimate, but behind the counter, Helena found whispers. Workers knew who came through, which debts got paid, and which didn't, and one clerk remembered Daniel. He said Daniel had been there the very week he disappeared, arguing with a man in a leather jacket about collateral. The clerk swore it wasn't about money anymore. It was about leverage. Helena followed the trail further to a bar known for Pike's hangouts. She walked in alone, her heart hammering, every nerve screaming to turn back. A man at the counter looked up. His face was hard, his eyes darker still. "You're Armitage's wife, aren't you?" he said. Helena froze. She hadn't given her name. The man slid a glass across the bar. "You should stop digging. People who dig end up in the ground." But then he leaned close, lowering his voice. "They still got him. Not dead yet, but if you want him back, you'll have to move faster than your cops. Pike doesn't leave loose ends." Helena walked out trembling, the man's warning echoing in her ears. She now faced an impossible choice: step back and let the police chase Pike's ghost, risking that by the time they found him, Daniel would already be gone, or follow this thread herself, deeper into Pike's world, knowing that every move she made pulled her closer to becoming a target. For the first time, Helena wasn't just surviving. She was hunting, and she knew, one way or another, the truth would come with a price. Helena had reached her breaking point. The police worked the case in circles. Pike's threats grew louder, and Daniel's life hung in the balance. If she wanted to save him, she couldn't do it alone. That's when she found someone who had lived through Pike's world and survived. Through whispers in town, Helena was introduced to Kara Hensley, a woman in her 40s who once ran a small roofing crew with her husband. Years earlier, Kara's husband borrowed from Pike. Weeks later, he vanished without a trace. Kara was left with scars and silence, but unlike others, she had dug into Pike's network herself, collecting scraps of information, names, addresses, things she never dared bring to the police. When Helena met her in a quiet diner outside town, Kara leaned across the table, voice low but sharp. "You're playing with fire, Helena, but maybe together we can stop pretending we aren't already burning." Kara shared what she'd kept hidden, a notebook full of coded names, contractors who owed Pike, addresses of suspected safe houses, some already abandoned, others still active, rumors of an enforcer called Red, known for moving captives between sites. What struck Helena most was this: 2 of the names in Kara's notebook matched entries Daniel had scribbled in his ledger before he disappeared. Daniel wasn't just a debtor. He'd been circling Pike's orbit longer than Helena realized. The 2 women agreed to work together, but trust didn't come easy. Helena still carried the photo of Daniel from the truck stop. Kara carried a photo of her husband, yellowed and creased, the last reminder of the man Pike had stolen. Both of them had something to lose. Both of them had nothing left to fear, and yet every step deeper into Pike's network put targets on their backs. Helena and Kara decided to focus on Pike's enforcer Red. Kara had heard whispers of a farmhouse near the county border where Red stayed between jobs. If Daniel was still alive, Red would know where. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and it was their only shot. That night, Helena sat on her porch, Archer pressed against her legs, staring into the dark. She knew that by teaming up with Kara, she wasn't just chasing answers anymore. She was declaring war on a man who made people vanish. And in Pike's world, wars didn't end with victories. They ended with bodies. Still, Helena whispered to herself, "If Daniel is alive, I'll find him, even if it means walking into Pike's den myself." The farmhouse sat on the edge of the county line, a crumbling relic swallowed by weeds and shadows. From the outside, it looked abandoned, roof sagging, shutters hanging loose, but Kara knew better. This is Red's place, she whispered as the two women crouched low in Helena's car, parked a half-mile down a dirt road. "He's Pike's muscle. If Daniel's alive, Red knows where." Helena's heart thudded. For weeks she'd been reacting, watching, waiting, fearing, but now, sitting in the dark with Kara's notebook in her lap, she felt something new, purpose. For hours they watched. The night was heavy with crickets and the hum of cicadas. Then, headlights, a black pickup pulled into the drive, a man climbed out, thick shoulders, red jacket, the enforcer. Red dragged something from the truck bed, a crate, and carried it inside. Minutes later, another man joined him, smaller, wiry, with the watchful posture of someone always looking for an exit. Kara whispered, "That's one of Pike's runners. He moves people." Helena gripped the photo of Daniel in her pocket. Could he be inside? Through a gap in the boarded window, Helena and Kara caught a glimpse. A dim bulb swayed over the kitchen table. Red sat hunched, drinking from a bottle. The wiry man laid out papers, maps, receipts, what looked like a schedule, and then Helena froze. On the wall behind them hung a corkboard, photos pinned across it, contractors, faces crossed out in red ink. Among them, Daniel's face, not crossed out. Her stomach lurched. "He's alive," Helena whispered. "He has to be." But Kara's hand clamped on her wrist. "Look closer." Pinned beneath Daniel's photo was another sheet, a timetable. Names, dates, locations, one line read, Armitage transfer, 3 days, 3 days. That was all they had before Daniel was moved again. Or worse. Kara swallowed hard. This isn't just Red's place. It's Pike's command post. They're running more than one debt at a time. Helena's throat went dry. She counted the other names on the board. 6, maybe 7. Each one a life dangling on Pike's leash. Daniel wasn't just a victim. He was part of a system, a conveyor belt of fear and silence. Before they could take a photo or get closer, Red slammed the door shut. A dog barked from the backyard. Headlights swept across the road. "Go," Kara hissed. Helena fumbled with the keys, tires spitting gravel as they sped back toward the highway, hearts pounding. Only once the farmhouse lights disappeared in the rear view did Kara finally speak. "You saw it, didn't you?" Helena nodded, voice trembling. 3 days. The farmhouse had confirmed their worst fears. Daniel wasn't dead. Not yet, but Pike's men had a plan, and the clock was ticking. Now Helena faced the hardest truth of all. Saving Daniel wouldn't just mean exposing Pike. It would mean putting herself and Kara directly in the crosshairs of a network that never left survivors. And with 3 days left on Daniel's name, every second mattered. The farmhouse had given Helena and Kara what they needed. Proof Daniel was still alive, but also a countdown. 3 days. That was all they had before Pike's men moved him, or erased him for good. They couldn't waste a second. The glimpse through the farmhouse window wasn't enough. If they wanted law enforcement to act, they needed more than their word. They needed hard evidence. The next night, Helena returned with Kara, armed with nothing but an old camera and Kara's battered notebook. From the cover of trees, Helena zoomed in through the same gap in the boards. Her hands shook as she captured the corkboard, the names, the dates. She pressed harder when the camera focused on Daniel's photo, pinned with the word transfer. The shutter clicked. A faint sound, but enough to make Red glance toward the window. Helena ducked, her pulse hammering in her ears. By the time they slipped back to the car, headlights flared behind them. An engine roared to life. "They know," Kara gasped. The black pickup tore down the road after them. Gravel sprayed as Helena floored the accelerator, heart in her throat. For a mile, the truck loomed behind, closing fast. Then, suddenly, it swerved onto a side road and vanished into the night. It wasn't mercy, it was a message. Pike's men knew someone was watching, and they wanted Helena to understand she'd been marked. The next morning, Helena delivered the camera to detectives. For once, their skepticism cracked. Photos were undeniable. Daniel's face, the timetable, the list of other victims. But moving on Pike wasn't simple. The farmhouse sat just outside their jurisdiction. They needed federal involvement. And that meant time Helena didn't have. 3 days, she reminded them. He won't survive your red tape. That night, Kara laid it bare. "We can't wait for them. If we want Daniel back, we go to the farmhouse ourselves. We hit them before the transfer. It's suicide, Helena, but it's the only shot." Helena stared at Daniel's ring on the table, the scratches catching the light. She thought of the photo from the truck stop, of his tired eyes searching for hers. She knew Kara was right, and so they made a plan, 2 women against Pike's network, a camera, a notebook, a half-tank of gas, and desperation as their weapon. They weren't just chasing proof anymore. They were about to crash headlong into the men who made people vanish, and if they succeeded, they'd drag Daniel back into the light. If they failed, they'd join him in the shadows Pike had ruled for years. As Helena loaded Archer into her sister's care and locked her front door, she whispered a prayer, not for safety, not even for herself, just for time, because Daniel's clock was running out. And the next move would bring her face with Pike himself. The farmhouse wasn't just a hideout anymore. It was the beating heart of Pike's operation. And with Daniel's transfer only a day away, Helena and Kara knew this was their last chance. Armed with nothing but courage, a borrowed camera, and a shaky plan, the 2 women returned to the dirt road. From the tree line, they watched as headlights swept across the farmhouse drive. A van rolled up. 2 men climbed out. One was Red, Pike's enforcer. The other, wiry and restless, carried a duffel bag heavy enough to drag his shoulder. Kara whispered, "That's him. They're getting ready to move Daniel." Helena's chest tightened. Somewhere inside that farmhouse, her husband was alive. Scared, beaten, but alive. She couldn't waste another second. The women crept closer, every crunch of leaves underfoot sounding like thunder. Helena steadied the camera, snapping photos of the van, the men, the duffel. Hard evidence Pike's crew was active, but then a dog barked, lights flared on the porch. Red stepped out, cigarette glowing, eyes scanning the tree line. Who's out there? The plan was broken. The time for watching was over. Helena and Kara bolted for the back door, slipping in through a sagging screen. The smell hit them first, wet gasoline and something metallic. In the back room, under that single swaying bulb, they saw him. Daniel, gaunt, hands bound, eyes hollow. But when he saw Helena, he blinked twice, as if trying to believe she was real. Helena. His voice was barely a whisper, but Red was faster than their relief. The door slammed open. He filled the frame, a pistol in one hand, rage in the other. Well, he growled. The wife comes crawling to the wolf's den. Helena's heart pounded, but Kara stepped forward. "You don't want this. We have photos, evidence. If anything happens here, Pike burns with you." Red sneered. "Lady, Pike doesn't burn. He makes everyone else burn first." For a moment it was silence. Helena's hand trembling on Daniel's arm, Kara squaring her shoulders against Red's threat. Then sirens, flashing lights cut through the trees. The detectives had tracked Helena's phone. realized where she'd gone. The sting Helena had begged for was finally here. Red cursed, swung his pistol toward the window, and chaos erupted. Helena had one choice. She grabbed the nearest object, a rusted wrench from the workbench, and swung. The pistol cracked, firing into the ceiling as Red stumbled back. Kara rushed forward, cutting Daniel's binds with a knife she'd smuggled in her boot. Daniel staggered to his feet, weak but free. "Go!" Kara screamed. As officers stormed the farmhouse, Helena pulled Daniel into the night. Gunfire rattled behind them. Kara's voice echoed in the chaos. When they reached the cruiser at the road's edge, Daniel collapsed in Helena's arms, his breath ragged but alive. But as sirens wailed and Red was dragged out screaming, one name carried above the noise: Pike. Pike's coming for all of you. Daniel was alive, for now. But Helena knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of Pike's war. Daniel was alive, but survival had left its marks. His eyes were sunken, his hands trembled, and every word seemed pulled from a well of exhaustion. But what he told detectives and Helena was worse than anything they imagined. In a hospital bed, hooked to Roman force, Daniel began to talk. His voice cracked, but his story poured out in fragments. Pike's men hadn't just beaten him. They'd broken him down piece by piece, making him watch how they operated. Every debtor who walked through their doors was given the same choice: repay, work, or disappear. Daniel had seen it firsthand. "They move us around," he whispered. "Cabins, basements, trucks. No pattern, just chaos. Keeps the cops guessing." And then, his voice dropped lower, "Mark was with me. They used him to scare me. Said if I didn't fall in line, he'd take the hit first. And when I didn't, he did." Helena's stomach turned. Mark hadn't betrayed Daniel. He'd died trying to protect him. Detectives pressed for details. Daniel described the farmhouse board, the names, the schedules. He confirmed what Kara and Helena had seen. Pike's network wasn't random. It was systematic, a conveyor belt of men and women swallowed by debts. Some ended up as laborers for Pike's fronts, others simply vanished, and Pike himself, Daniel never saw him directly. "He's like smoke," Daniel said. "You know he's there, but you can't grab him. His men do the dirty work. He just pulls the strings." For Helena, the truth burned deeper than fear. Daniel's survival wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't enough to keep running, keep hiding, keep praying Pike would forget them. The man who had written her name on that slip of paper wouldn't stop until she was silenced. For the first time, Helena stopped thinking like a survivor. She started thinking like someone preparing for war. That night, after visiting Daniel, Helena sat with Kara in the hospital cafeteria. "This doesn't end with Daniel home in bed," Helena said, her voice steadier than it had ever been. "It ends when Pike can't hurt anyone else. Not me, not Daniel, not you, not anyone." Kara studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we stop surviving, we start fighting." The two women shook hands across the table, an unspoken pact. They weren't just victims anymore. They were the beginning of Pike's downfall. But even as they made their vow, Pike's shadow loomed, because while Helena and Kara were planning their move, Pike was already making his, and in his world, retaliation wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Helena thought the farmhouse raid, Daniel's rescue, and Red's arrest had shifted the tide. But in Pike's world, every move had consequences, and Pike's retaliation came fast, brutal, and merciless. It started with Kara. One evening, as she pulled into her driveway, her headlights caught the shimmer of shattered glass. Her front windows had been smashed, her door spray, painted with two words, "Next time." Inside, her husband's old photo albums lay ripped apart on the floor. Not stolen, just destroyed. It wasn't robbery, it was a message. Helena wasn't spared. 2 nights later, she returned from the hospital to find Archer trembling at the back door. On her kitchen table sat a small box. No note, no signature, just a bloodied ratchet strap coiled neatly inside. Her stomach dropped. It was the same kind they had found in Daniel's truck. The implication was clear. We still own you. Detectives warned Helena and Kara to step back. Red was in custody, but Pike himself was untouchable without stronger evidence. Going public will only make you bigger targets. One officer said, but Helena knew better. Hiding didn't make you safe. It just gave Pike more time to plan. Late one night, Kara sat with Helena at the hospital cafeteria again, voices low over untouched coffee. "We've got 2 options," Kara said. "We disappear. New names, new lives. Let Pike keep running his empire. Or we push back, hard. We take the evidence we've got, drag it into the light, and force Pike into a corner." Helena looked at Daniel, asleep and broken in the next room. She thought of Mark, who died trying to shield him. She thought of the other faces pinned to Red's corkboard, and she realized this wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about everyone who would come after him if she stayed quiet. The decision was forced sooner than she expected. That night, Helena's phone buzzed with a blocked number. When she answered, the voice was low, deliberate, unmistakably Pike's. "You made it this far, Helena. Impressive, but understand this. Every move you make drags Daniel closer to the grave. You've been digging for him. Walk away, and maybe I let you breathe. Keep fighting, and I'll finish what I started." The line went dead. Helena's hands shook, but her resolve did not. For months she had been prey. Now Pike had drawn the line in blood. Helena and Kara had only 2 paths left: vanish into silence, or risk everything to take him down once and for all. And as Helena whispered to herself in the dark, clutching Daniel's ring, her answer was clear: "I'm done running." The war with Pike was about to begin. For months, Helena had been running, hiding, surviving. But Pike's threats changed her. The bloodied ratchet strap, the voice on the phonet had been meant to break her. Instead, it made her unbreakable. This time, she wasn't waiting for Pike to come to her. She and Kara were going on the offensive. Red had always been Pike's blunt instrument, violent, loyal, and feared. But sitting in a jail cell, facing federal charges, Red was no longer the wolf at Pike's heel. He was expendable. Detectives offered him a deal: cooperate or rot. At first he laughed, but when they showed him the evidence, the corkboard photos, the farmhouse, the burner phones, his smirk cracked. And when Kara walked into the interrogation room with her notebook of names and dates, Red's bravado finally slipped. "You think Pike cares about me? He spat. He doesn't care about anyone. He'll burn me, just like the rest." Then, slowly, he leaned forward. "But if you really want him, I can show you where to look." Red's confession opened doors, drop locations where Pike's men exchanged cash and victims, names of shell companies laundering money through construction contracts, safe houses where people like Daniel were kept until Pike decided their fate. But the crown jewel was this: a date and place where Pike himself was rumored to appear, a rare gathering hidden under the guise of a business meeting. It was the chance they had been waiting for, to draw Pike into the open. Helena and Kara knew the police alone couldn't be trusted to move quickly. Bureaucracy slowed everything, and Pike's network thrived on delays. So they decided to bait Pike themselves. With Red's help, they would feed Pike false intel, make him believe Helena was ready to fold, to hand over evidence in exchange for safety. It was dangerous. It was reckless. But it was the only way to bring him into the light. Helena looked at Kara across the table, her voice steady. "If this works, we end it. If it doesn't, we don't walk away." Kara nodded. "Then we don't blink. We don't flinch. We drag him down with us." For the first time, the 2 women weren't just widows, victims, or survivors. They were hunters, and Pike, The man who had thrived in shadows for years was about to be forced into the open. The bait was set. A meeting arranged, a false promise whispered through Red's old channels. Now all that was left was to wait, and pray that Pike would take it, because once he stepped into that room, everything would come to a head. Justice, revenge, survival, all hanging by a single, fraying thread. The plan was simple, deadly simple. Through Red's channels, Helena had let Pike believe she was ready to deal, ready to hand over everything she and Kara had collected. Photos, names, proof in exchange for safety. The bait! A midnight meeting in an abandoned mill on the edge of Briar Mill. Neutral ground, quiet, forgotten. If Pike wanted to shut her up once and for all, this was his chance. Helena walked into the mill first, her steps echoing on cracked concrete. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed calm. She clutched Daniel's ring in her pocket, grounding herself in the one truth Pike couldn't erase. Daniel had survived. Kara waited in the shadows above, hidden in the rusted catwalk with a camera trained on the floor. Detectives were nearby, listening in through a wire tucked beneath Helena's jacket. All they had to do was wait. Headlights slashed across the broken windows. Engines rumbled. 2 SUV rolled up, black and sleek. Doors slammed, and then he appeared, Brandon Pike, tall, immaculate suit, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. He didn't look like a loan shark or a thug. He looked like a businessman arriving for a handshake deal. And that made him even more terrifying. Well, Pike said, voice smooth as silk, the little counselor who thought she could play detective. Helena stood her ground. You tried to destroy my husband, my life, but you made a mistake, Pike. You left me breathing. Pike's smile widened. Breathing, yes, for now, but you should have taken my offer. Silence, safety, now. I'll have to make an example. He gestured, and his men closed in. From the catwalk, Kara's camera clicked furiously, capturing everything. The threats, the faces, the admission. But one wrong move, and the proof wouldn't matter. Before Pike's men could grab her, Helena shouted, "You're done, Pike. The world knows." Red flipped. He gave you up. For the first time, Pike's mask cracked. His eyes narrowed, red, and then sirens, floodlights. Officers poured into the mill. The trap had been sprung. Gunfire erupted. Pike's men drew weapons, bullets sparking off steel beams. Helena dove behind a pillar as Kara shouted from above, "We've got him on record." The mill became a war zone. Shouts, shots, chaos. In the scramble, Pike tried to slip through a side door, shadows swallowing him, but Helena was faster. She stepped into his path, wrench in hand, the same one she'd used to save Daniel from Red. "You're not walking away this time." For a heartbeat, Pike's eyes flickered with something almost human surprise. Then the officers closed in, forcing him to the ground, cuffing his wrists. The empire that had thrived in silence was dragged into the light. As Pike was shoved into the back of a squad car, Helena finally exhaled. Kara lowered her camera, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, still healing, would never forget the months of captivity, the scars marked sacrifice left behind. But now, for the first time, there was hope, because Pike's rule of fear had ended, and it ended with 2 women who refused to stay victims. Pike was gone, dragged from the mill in cuffs, his empire collapsing around him. But for Helena, Daniel, and Kara, the end of Pike's reign didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, barely. Daniel came home weeks later, thinner, scarred, and quieter than the man who once laughed through late night projects in his garage. Every creak of the floorboards, every bark of Archer, still made him flinch, but Helena stayed close. She held his hand in silence when words failed. She helped him relearn the small rituals of normal life. Coffee in the morning, walks by the river, a cracked tile in the kitchen they promised never to fix. Together, they built their days slowly, like stacking bricks after a storm. For Helena, the will she once signed in a quiet lawyer's office was no longer just paper. It was a symbol, the day she unknowingly started a fight for both their lives. Kara finally got answers about her husband. Red's testimony revealed he had been one of Pike's earliest victims, worked until he broke, then discarded. The truth was devastating, but it also freed her from years of silence. Kara took the notebook she had carried like a wound and turned it over to the police, closing its cover for the last time. Her mission wasn't revenge anymore. It was making sure no one else ended up on Pike's list. Briar Mill had lived in Pike's shadow for too long. Contractors, handymen, small crews, all had whispered his name, fearing debts that never let go. When the news broke that Pike's empire had fallen, the town exhaled for the first time in years. But the scars were everywhere. Families still grieved for the missing. Businesses carried holes where workers once stood. The community began to reckon with the truth. Pike hadn't just been one man, he had been a system. And dismantling that system would take years. For Helena, life would never return to what it had been. Every time she looked at Daniel, she saw not just her husband, but the price of surviving Pike. Some nights, Daniel woke in a cold sweat, whispering Mark's name. Some mornings, Helena stood at the river, wondering how close she'd come to losing everything. But when she looked at Pike's photo in the paper, his smirk gone, his hands bound, she felt something new. Not peace, not triumph, resolve, because Pike's shadow had been long, but it hadn't been endless. In the end, the story of Daniel and Helena Armitage wasn't about a will or a debt, or even Pike himself. It was about what happens when ordinary people refuse to remain prey. Helena had once whispered to herself, "I'm done running." Now, as she sat on her porch with Daniel beside her and Archer at their feet, she knew she had kept that promise. And though Pike was gone, the world he built remained a warning, etched into the memory of a town that had lived too long in fear. Some battles end in victory, others end in survival. This one ended with both. Thank you for watching this murder book 360 deep dive into one of the most chilling cases of love, debt, and betrayal. If this story gripped you the way it gripped us, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more true crime storytelling, and share this video with others who follow the shadows of crime. New episodes drop every week, so stay tuned, stay safe, and never stop questioning the stories that hide in plain sight.